Hello everyone. Sadly, we have some technical problems today. Erika is she can't connect, so I will do the introduction. Today we're going to talk about the power of GitHub Actions, and it's the third season we actually do something here at Reactor with different GitHub topics, and it's the third episode of this session. So we have been talking earlier about working with GitHub as an efficient developer, and last week I talked about working with requirements with GitHub issues, and next week we're going to have a talk about the power of GitHub Advanced Security. My name is Magnus, and I'm a consultant at Solidify, and I work a lot with DevOps and GitHub. And with me I have Matthias. Would you like to say a few words about you, Matthias?
Yeah, sure. Great to be here again. I'll join Magnus to do the moderation. So feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we'll be answering as we go along. And we might take a few questions at the end as well. Also working as a consultant with Solidify. So GitHub is something we all love, and happy to be here to share our experiences.
So Mattis, kick it off.
Yep. Hello everyone, and welcome. Today we're gonna explore how GitHub Actions can help you streamline your CI/CD workflows and make your software development process faster and more efficient. So I will try to fit the session into 45 minutes or so we would have time in the end for questions. So my name is Maris, and I work as a DevOps consultant at Solidify, focused on GitHub and Microsoft platforms mainly. I'm helping companies optimize software development, automate deployment workflows, and build scalable cloud-based infrastructure. Let's continue on. The previous sessions were already mentioned, so I'm gonna continue on with this one. As my colleagues, Magnus and Matthias, in the previous sessions also used AI to get an answer to a question that was related to their session. So I thought I'll follow the same pattern and do the same. So before this session, I asked also ChatGPT, how does GitHub Actions help with the software development lifecycle? And the answer I got was quite good. So the important things are mentioned here, which are CI/CD, code review that can be used with GitHub Actions as well. It will make it more easy for the teams to collaborate on code reviews, enabling developers to get feedback on their code and identify issues that need to be fixed. So issue tracking is also important, and security. So I will cover some parts of these. Which is mainly the CI/CD part, and what else you can do with GitHub Actions. So yeah, so we'll continue on this. In this session, what I will cover. So first, I'll go through briefly what GitHub Actions are. Then we're going to talk about continuous integration and what kind of automation is possible besides that. We're going to look at multi-stage deployment, and for the last part, we're going to see. I'm going to demo how we can do a self-service with issue ops. If you have been in the previous sessions, you probably have seen this slide before. So this slide just covers the features of the GitHub platform, and my colleagues already talked about some features, for example, the code one and the planning one. So today I will cover the deploy and build features. Let's start by going into and see what GitHub Actions are. So GitHub Actions is a powerful automation platform that allows you to build, test, and deploy your code directly from a GitHub repository. So with GitHub Actions, you can create workflows that trigger different actions based on events, such as when you push code changes, or when your pull request is created, or if you raise an issue, do an action in the issue, and the list goes on and on what you can do. So that being said, so actions are used to automate your workflows, and the workflows are stored as YAML files, which is really good because we want everything in the development process to be stored within our code repository. So actions are fully integrated with GitHub, and workflows can actually respond to different GitHub events, as I already stated. We also have live logs and resource workflow executions that I will also show in the demos later on. There's a huge community behind the actions, and there should be around 11 to 12,000 extensions, or by now even more, that are powered by the community out there. You can host your own runners, or use GitHub hosted runners, which are running on Linux, Mac, or Windows. So there's also a built-in secret store that can be used. So there are a lot of features, right? And so let's take a look how this fits into our development processes. So on this slide, you can see the development software development lifecycle. And when it comes to GitHub, and what you might usually connect GitHub Actions to is either compiling and building your artifacts or your application, testing them, and deploying deploying it somewhere. But there are also other types of automations that can be done besides CI/CD. So, and later on in the last step of this session, I will show you how we could do a self-software operation, as I mentioned. So what that means is that we will automate a common, with the self-software, we can automate a common developer task or a development activity. For example, let's say closing stale issues in GitHub, or you can drive different automations as part of your pull requests. So you can do a lot with GitHub Actions besides just doing continuous integration builds. So let's take a look what kind of automation is possible with GitHub Actions then. So as I said, you can do CI/CD with it. And GitHub has something called GitHub Marketplace, which is a really good place where there are a lot of good open sourced actions when it comes to CI/CD, for example, or other automation tasks that you want to do. So on this slide, I have selected a few as an example, which I have used most, or which I think are good examples. For example, the GitHub scripts. This one is a action created by GitHub, and it can be used inside your workflows to script easily and quickly to interact with GitHub API and run in a workflow context. And the cool thing about this action is that it offers a complete OctoKit library, which is pre-authenticated and ready to use inside your workflows. So another one that I mentioned already is close stale issues action, which is also a great example. So it allows you to manage issues in your repository. So let's say that you have a lot of issues opened and nobody's taking care of those. So with this action, it will mark your issues as stale and then eventually close them for you, depending on the configuration that you set up. But let's jump into an actual demo now, how we can initially set up a simple CI/CD workflow with some actions and see how that works. So for that, I have prepared something already, but I will do the workflows on the fly. So I have a repository at GitHub. I have a sample .NET application already inside it, which I will then build and deploy. So to get started, we can go to the Actions tab, and from there we can start creating the workflow that we want to. So here you can also see there are already predefined workflow templates that you could use to start up your workflow initially. But in this case, I already have prepared something, so I will just start with to set up a workflow by myself. And I will just have a code snippet that I will copy in, and then I will just explain what it does. So for first, just 1 second. Let me copy it in here. There we go. So first, I'll just quickly talk about this UI as well, which is really cool. If you do the workflows inside the GitHub UI, is that you have an opportunity to do actually query the marketplace right away, so you can get the actions that you might need directly here, and then just it would.
Manis?
Yep.
We needed a slightly bigger picture, please. So if you can zoom in a bit, it's hard to see.
Of course. Yes. Thank you for reminding me. 1 second. Oops. I think that's too much. Is this okay?
Yeah, I think a little bit more, I think would be good. I think that's too much. That would be good. Perfect. Thanks, Matis.
Okay, that's good. All right, now I lost the UI. Okay, I can get it back. So as I was saying, that there's the marketplace view here that you can directly get your actions, public actions that you would want to, and then just inject them into the workflow. But just to go over what I have set up here. So I have so first I set up a workflow name. In this case, it's called build and publish. I have set some triggers, and for this case, I have this workflow will be triggered on a push if there's a push to the repository, or if there's a pull request open against the main branches, or I can define a different pattern for a branch. I can define environment variables that can be used inside the workflow itself, either on the workflow level, or on the jobs level, or even on the steps level. But in this case, so just for simplicity, I will do it on the workflow level. After that, I need to define some jobs that will do the building and compiling and then deploying. So first, I have a build job that I say that will be running on a Ubuntu latest. So if I do it this way, it will use the GitHub hosted runners, which is a Linux machine. I can set a default directory where the workflow will be running as. So in this case, for the building, I have set that, but it's not always needed. And so I'm going to output a variable after this job is finished. So to do that, I need to call the outputs.
Hello, Matis. We would like you to zoom in even a little bit more.
Yes, sure. It's this widescreen that is making things more complicated. Is this okay?
Yeah. I think one more.
More? Sure.
Yeah,
that's fine.
That would be perfect. Thank you, Matis.
Perfect. Yeah, no worries. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, so now we're going to continue on the steps, which are actually the actions that will be called out. So here I'm using multiple ones, some that are publicly available in the marketplace, for example, the checkout one. So this checkouts the code from the repository. Second, I will use another action that will set up the .NET environment for me. And then I will just call some .NET commands to compile the code and then package it up. So that I'm doing on these steps. And after that, I have a last step in this job, which will upload the build artifact to the artifactory that's on GitHub. Then from there, I can pull that package down on the next steps that I might have. So, and for the last job, what I have here set up is I have a publish one. this one has a needs syntax here as well. What this means is that this job will only run if the previous one has successfully completed or run through. So it's good to put that check there. So otherwise, it will continuously always run as well, which I would not like to do. And the concept is basically the same for this job as well. So I have to define where it runs and what are the steps that this job will do. So ideally, it will do the same. It will check out some code. It will download the artifact that I uploaded in the previous job, and then I will just deploy it to an Azure resource that I have already set up. Now, if I commit this, I'll just commit it directly to the main branch. And now I should have a action ready. So if I go to actions now that I committed something to the main branch and had a trigger for that, it got triggered right away. So hopefully my copy pasting was good enough and it doesn't fail on any syntax errors. So let's wait a few seconds and see what it does. So here's the nice visualization of the workflow when it is running. You can see all the summary, what jobs it does. You can directly go to the workflow if you want to. You can see what was the trigger, what is the status, and if there were any artifacts created, what were the artifacts, and so forth. You can even go inside the steps and see in more detail how the workflow looked like, or what it did. So see that it set up the job, set up the VM in GitHub, a container instance, and then it runs the steps that we defined in the workflow. So now that I go back to the summary, I should see that the published one is still running. So if I go inside this one, so I see the last one takes a bit of time, a few seconds here and there. We can wait for that. So we can see even more detailed log if we want to, what steps this action really does. So let's wait a bit. Shouldn't be that long. Now it finished, and now it's doing the post steps and has completed the job. Seems that this one went fine fast. So this has now finished. Now if I go to my URL where the application should have been deployed, ideally this should work. If it deploys successfully, it should display a hello world application. Let's wait a second. It takes a bit of time to spin up things. Oh yeah, and here we have a site here. Cool. So we have set up the first workflow. We'll build and deploy our application. So I'm going to continue with the slides a bit, and then we're going to continue with the demos. So for next, so we saw that what we can do in the CI/CD, but we can. But GitHub Actions is really extensible. So as I already mentioned, you can extend your workflows with all of the actions from the marketplace. They're public. You can pin specific versions from the actions from there, so you don't have to use the latest one always. So then to extend it even further, there's something called workflow templates. I'm not going to go into those in detail, but I briefly showed them when I showed when I created the workflow. There were a lot of templates, so those are the workflow templates that you can use. So they're really easy to set up. You just need to create it and add it to a specific folder, and it will show you, and it will show up when you actually try to create the new workflow. So you can create it for your own or for your organization. It's up to you. Then we have something called reusable workflows, and those workflows can be defined in different repositories or in the same repository, and those can be reused across multiple repositories. So what it does is it allows teams to create and maintain a single set of workflows that can be easily shared across different projects. We also have custom actions. Those can be implemented in either JavaScript, Docker, or as a composite action. And the composite action is basically a list of actions in a workflow file. And the custom actions can be published publicly if you want to, or they can use privately, or you can share them internally only within your organization. So basically, you could build up a code repo for your organization or for yourself with some common actions to reuse. You don't have to repeat yourself. But for this session, we're going to continue with the initial demo that I did, and we're going to extend it a bit to use a reusable workflow. So for that, I'm going to stop the slides again. I'm going to go back to the repository. So to do this, I will update the initial workflow. I'm going to do it a bit differently this time. So what GitHub also has really cool is if you click dot on your keyboard, it will open a visual code in your browser, and it's a lot easier to update the workflow files or any other files right away than doing to the UI. So I can see the same context here that I had. So for this, I need to create a new reusable workflow. Let me just copy that one so I don't misspell anything. So we need a new file, which will be called this one. And let me copy the context for that as well, and then I'll explain what it does. So we are creating a reusable workflow, and what it does is, or how it's set up is that it has a trigger, which is called workflow call. So that is called only through another workflow. So that's what it means. You can add different inputs for this one or outputs if you want to. But the main principle is the same. You need to define the jobs that we will run. In this case, I have a deploy job, which is doing the same steps that it did in the previous published job. So it will download the artifact that is created in the build job, and then it will just deploy it to Azure. So I need this, and I need to modify the main workflow as well. So for that, I'm gonna replace it with extra code. If it's too small, please let me know. Yeah.
So Maris, it is
yes.
too small. So zoom, please.
Yes, that was I afraid of. So this should be okay, I guess.
Yeah, I think you can take it even bigger.
Sure, I can. No problems.
All
right.
Take it one more. One more.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this will be good, and keep it this way. Thank you, Maris.
Yes, I'll remember it because it's a different tab, so you can follow the same zooming. Anyway, so the main one looks almost the same, besides the last part, which is now called a deploy prod a job. It also still needs a build, and now if I want to use a reusable workflow, I need to use this syntax is uses, and then the path where the workflow is. Currently, it's in the same repository, so I need to call it like that. Otherwise, if it would be in a different repository, you would then pass in the repository details and the organization details, and then just follow the same pattern. So I need to send in so I need to use with keyword with package path, because in my reusable workflow, I had an input that was required, which is this one. So I need to pass it in. So I'm passing in the output of a different step, and I'm going to inherit all of the secrets that I might have in my repository. So I will show those a little bit later in my other demo. So now that I have updated this one, and I have updated the deploy, and I've added a reusable workflow as well, I need to commit those. So I know how to type. Okay, so I'm going to commit and push those. And now if I go back to the repository, if I refresh here, if I go to actions, I should see there's a new action triggered, which is the last changes that we did. So it will do the same, it will do the build, and then it will use the reusable workflow to do the deployment. So it's a bit difficult to see if anything changed, because I didn't change anything in the UI, but we can do that. I can cancel this workflow just to confirm that something did change. So I will go quickly into the views. Let's take the home index view, and let's modify this file so we know that something actually changed. Welcome. My name there, and let's do this. So this will trigger a new action. Just took a couple of seconds, and yeah. So I'll let it run. I'll show it in a bit, but I'll continue quickly with my slide, and then I'll just come back and see the result of this, just to save up the time. So I have some slides to go through more. So I'm going to jump back into my slides and continue from here. So yeah, we're going to jump into that later, how that finished. But next is we're going to go in further, and we're going to go and see how we can change this workflow as a multi-stage deployment. So you can do stage deployments with approvals natively in your GitHub Actions. And how that works is that you can set up your deployment jobs to depend on each other using the neat syntax, as I already had. And to logically separate your jobs, GitHub has something called environments that helps with that. And in the environments, you can set up environment-specific rules, protection rules, secrets, or variables that you need. So when a workflow gets to a job that deploys to a protected environment, it will actually stop, and it will wait for the approval before it continues. And you'll also get a nice visualization and logs of who approved or rejected what and when. So I'm gonna now jump into that. So we're gonna modify the workflow even further and see how we can change it to be a multi-stage deployment. So I'm gonna stop the slides here. Oops, went too far. So if I first go back and see that this one finished, and if I refresh my website, ideally I should have, yeah, you have a new deployment here actually, and it's worked. All right, so let's continue changing the actions, the workflows. So for that, I will do some other modifications, which I will copy in as well. 1 second. So I want this one. I don't want my emails. Yep, so the main one. So we're gonna modify this. So I'm gonna save this. So what I did here is the beginning is the same, and the only difference is in the last two things. So now we have two jobs. One is deploy test, which still needs to build. It's dependent on that one. And then it will call it the reusable workflow that we already set up. We will add a new input there that is required, which is an environment. So we can distinguish which environment it will deploy to. and everything else will stay the same. It will still send in the package name that is needed. So for the production deployment, we have two needs or two dependencies. One is the build, and that the test deployment actually was successful as well and ran. And it will call the same reusable workflow with a different parameter for the environment. So we're gonna set up the reusable workflow. That needs to be modified as well a bit. I'm gonna change that one. There we go. So the difference here is just that it will take in an environment, and some of the variables that were being used are now being replaced a bit differently as well. I'll explain that in a second. So for the app name, we are using something called vars.appName. So this is coming from an environment variable, which we will set up in a second. And the other difference here is we're going to have a environment-specific slot name as well. So we know that we're going to deploy either to a test slot or to the production one for the Azure app. Right, we have those set up. Before I commit this, I'm going to go back to the repository. So I need to go to this. So I need to set up the environments now for the multi-stage deployment. I need to go to settings. I need to go to environments. And here I need to create two new environments that I have. One is going to be called test. So I'm going to configure that one. So here I can set different protection rules, as I mentioned. I can add a required reviewer, wait timer, and do other things. I can restrict or I can limit which branches are allowed to be deployed. In this case, for the test one, I don't mind if it's all branches. But what I do need to do is I need to add a new secret. And this secret will be called this one. It's a published profile for the Azure deployment. And I need a value for that. So let me copy this one and add the secret. So the reason I need to do this, I'll explain that in a second before I add the environment variable that I need also. I needed the slot name, and the value for that will be test. Add variable. So I have set those up. So previously I mentioned you can have you have a built-in secret storage. So for that, if you go to if you go to secrets and variables actions, you see that I have already set up some repository secrets, and the one is repository secrets that I set up before this session was Azure published profile. This is for the production one, and I have also set up a token, a personal access token that will be used in the issues example. But the reason why I needed to set up the same key, the same secret in the test environment is that for the test slot, there's the published profile is different. So so first, when the workflow is executed, it will try to see what secrets or variables you have set up in the environment context. It will then replace those, and then it will move up the hierarchy either to repository or environment secrets or organization secrets what you have set up. So there's the reason for that. So if I go back to the code, I need to commit this now. To get this work, I need to add a message as well. Okay, actually, in the meanwhile, before I do that, so let's update the view as well. So I know that actually something happened. I haven't put links, but it should be fine. So let's say, hello world. And let's commit and push those changes. The stage, commit and push. Yep, I will do a sync as well. Shouldn't be any conflicts, hopefully. And let's accept current changes. And yeah, I need to merge, because I didn't pull the latest before. So if I go back to my repository code, I should see there was a commit multi-stage, and this one triggered a new new multi-stage action. One thing I did forgot. Sorry about that. I will cancel this one. Is that if I go quickly to the settings, what I wanted to show you, yeah, I forgot to create the production environment. So I need to create the production environment. And in this case, I will add a reviewer as well. So it won't be triggered until somebody approves it. I will add myself as a reviewer. And I need to add a variable for this one as well. And this will be a slot name. It's going to be called production variable. And I'm going to do one more. Yeah, I didn't save the reviewer. Let's add it again. Save. So not that should be saved. So one thing I'll do more. I'll say that I want to have a selected branches only, and I will say only from the main branch it can be deployed for this one. Okay, now that is all set up. I can do a small change in the README, let's say. Hello. And let's commit this again, and this will trigger the last change that we had. All right. So README was updated. Now we should see a bit more in the workflow visualization. We should see how we build step, and we then have two deployments there for test and production. So let's wait a few seconds and see how this goes. Yeah, we can go actually inside and see more logs here. So it's already packaged everything up and it's uploading artifacts. Perfect. So if I go, so here I can directly go to the deployment step for the test one. So hopefully everything works here. So it has started the deployment. So I can see, it doesn't allow me to see yet, but from the setup job, I can see what type of inputs were sent in, just to verify that the test and web app were sent in for the reusable workflow. And now I can see what this is doing as well. So I see that it deploys to a test slot. And there's an application name. Okay, it finished already. Didn't expect that. So, and I see it uses public profile, which was a secret. So this will not be displayed in the logs. And it seems to went nicely. So I should have a other one. So I have a test slot here as well. So if I refresh this, it should have a different, text in it. Hello world. Perfect. So now if I go back to the workflow, if I go to actions and go to the latest one. So I set up a reviewer for the production one. So this one hasn't run until I actually approve it. So that's very cool. So I can say, I can click on review deployments. I can say to where, and I can leave a comment. Continue with deployment. So I can either reject or if I'm not happy with it, or I can just approve and deploy. In this case, I'm just going to approve and deploy. And then it will queue the next job and it will do the same deployment as it did for the test job, but to the production environment. So we can go inside and check that one. So I'm pretty sure this will actually run through. Just wait a few seconds. I see that I have a little bit more time left, so I should be good to go. Okay, should take around 30 seconds as the previous ones did. Okay, finished. So this should change as well if reloads, I guess. Interesting. To deploy production, yes. So let's do a refresh here. Oops. It's not what I wanted. If I refresh this one, oh, yeah, indeed, it got updated. Just took a few seconds. So that's how you do a multi-stage deployment, for example, with different actions. So I'm going to continue with my last part of this session, which is going to be the eShops. And so in this, we're gonna connect the issue system with automation, and I will be using different pre-existing actions as well as I did before to demo how we could use the issues to automate our own processes. The idea behind it is to treat the issue system as some sort of a self-service portal where we tie automation to the issue form. So the benefit of using this for self-service work is that we get kind of a built-in traceability and documentation, because we get both the automation and the interaction of the user captured in the issue itself. So with the issue form, we can standardize how we do things and codify the process in our automation workflows. So for this, there could be a lot of use cases. One simple one would be a standard way for your organization of creating repositories, for example, or you can automate the provisioning of new infrastructure for your to test your application, and so forth. So you can do whatever you can come up with, basically. So I'm gonna show you. I have an example how to create a repository through the issue form. So we'll try to do that quickly since I have a little bit of time left. So I should have made the slide big, but I didn't. Or for some reason small. Anyway, let's continue with the last demo then. So for this, I need to do two things. I need to create a issue template that I can use. So for that, I need to let's go to code. I need to add a file, create a new file, and in a specific folder, which is called issue template, template, and then this will be called. 1 second. That I can. So let's say it's going to be called create issue .yaml, and the content for this one will look something like this, and I'll explain what it does in a second. So we have the content for the issue form. So we need to define the name for it, a description, what it does. We need to add a title. In this case, it's going to be request repository creation. We can add labels, so that labels are automatically added when you create an issue. And then for the body, we can have different input, different types of text fields where we can gather information. So in this case, I have two inputs. One is where I want to get the repository name, and the other one is a repository type where I just want to specify what type of repository it is. For example, it's a .NET one or JavaScript one, and so forth. So I'm gonna commit this one. So now I have issue form. If I go to code, go to, I added it in the wrong place. That's my bad. Can I? Yeah. So let me fix that. So it's easier to fix through here. So if I pull latest, should see something. No, why not? Don't show this again. So if I so just let's refresh. I don't need to pull anything, just need to refresh. So I have issue templates. This actually should be inside the .github folder. So I'm going to quickly commit that fix and correct that. And let's commit this one. And if I go back to the repository and refresh, it should be in the right place. Indeed, I have issue form. If I click on it, it will be displayed like that. It's using the issue form template. This is still a beta feature, but in a public repository you can use it. So I have an issue form now, and the next one I need is a actual workflow that knows what to do with it. So I will quickly add a workflow, creating a file, and this will be say create repo, it's a YAML file, and then I'll copy the contents, and I can explain what it does. It's a bit longer one, but what it does, it's the same principles, but it will be triggered on different events. It will be triggered on an issue if an issue is opened or reopened. Basically, open means it's created. I'm specifying something called permissions that are on the workflow context, because GitHub has something called GitHub token. That's a token that is used for authentication inside the workflow in the workflow context. So I need to do that. I need to have extra permissions here, and I'm also defining the jobs. So I have a preferred job, which has a condition when it runs. So it is looking for a label called create repo. Otherwise, it will not run this step. But otherwise, it will do the same. It will run on a GitHub hosted runner. It will output some variables for me. And the steps that it does, it will. I'm using a public action here that I will know how to parse the repository, so I can pass in some parameters for that. Then I will output some variables, as I showed above, for this workflow to use. So I'm using the GitHub script action. So to output the variables, you type it like so in JavaScript using the octogit library. And so forth. After that, if that step is done, it will send a greeting message using the GitHub API. So when those steps are done in those jobs, it will continue with the next job, which is actually creating the repository. So this has some conditions as well. It needs the prepare step to actually be run first. It needs to make sure that the event that was triggered is issue, and either it was opened or reopened. And then what it does is it will create the repository using the GitHub API again with the GitHub script action. So either that is a success or failure, I will then post a message inside the issue itself. And that's about it. And also when it's a success, I will say that's a success, and then I will close the issue. So it won't be left open. So let's commit those changes and let's see if it works. And so I'll quickly go to issues and I'm running out of time. I think we'll make it. So now that I have issue template, if I create a new issue, I should see different options here. This is the template that I created. Get started. I'm going to say demo app as a repository name. As I already defined in the issue form that I have a label that is needed to be added, and I already pre-created it, so it will be added automatically. Otherwise, it will not if it doesn't exist. And let's say this is let's say it's a .NET repository. Yeah, right now it's going to be empty anyway. It's going to create an empty repository. So now if I submit this issue, an issue will be created. It will trigger an action. So if I go to actions, I should see something was triggered. This one. So this will do the prepare step, and then it will do the trigger prepare one fine. So if I go back to the issue, I should see that a bot sent a comment to me. It's the one that I had in the workflow. Thank you for opening. This is the repository that will be created. And it already managed to do the second step in the workflow that will actually create the repository, and it added a link here where the repo is. So if I go there, I should have a new blank repository. And you can have a template repository as well that you will create then and so forth. But that's how you could use the issue forms to automate some work that is needed. I'm going to jump back into the slides. Let's make it full screen. So that's about it, what I had. So in summary, GitHub Actions have a lot of use cases in your software development lifecycle. There's the CI/CD, as mentioned as well, and today I also showed some other examples of developer efficiency and other automations we could do with GitHub Actions, such as issue or pull request automation and all other sorts of cool stuff. So in the end, GitHub Actions is code, and you should refactor and generalize to build your own things. And basically, it all comes down to your own imagination. What is the limit and what you could do with GitHub Actions? And that's about it that I had for this session. So I also have a slide here, what to do next with this information. So I have some links which are really useful for getting started with GitHub Actions. So I recommend taking a look at those. And yeah, as mentioned in the beginning of the session, there's another session with my colleague Sanjin. He's talking about elevating security with GitHub Advanced Security. It's happening next Thursday. I hope everybody will join there as well.
Thank you very much, Mattis. Good presentation. We had lots of, me and Matthias had a hard time in the chat answering all the questions, so it was good.
Kept us busy this time. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I imagine.
So, you work with GitHub Actions every day, Mattis. What do you think is, you say, your one or two best things with GitHub Actions?
Yeah, I do work with every day with it. One or two best things. I mean, to put those two one or two things together is that you can automate whatever you want to simplify your developer life, basically.
I know, for example, that you do a lot of migrations when you move customers to GitHub, and you use GitHub Actions for doing self-service stuff.
Exactly. So that's a really good benefit. So you don't have to do tedious migrations every time repeating yourself. You just create the workflow that will take an issue, for example, as an input, an issue form as an input, and then you can automate the entire process. That's super nice. So it saves a lot of time.
And Matthias, I think we have a question for you. It's always hard to answer, so I give it to you this time. So what are the advantages of GitHub Actions over Azure DevOps? So let's see what you think.
Yeah, that's a crystal clear question. No, I think there's so much similarities in the two systems, so you can achieve pretty much the same thing with them. And even though we didn't touch on that earlier, there is actually a legacy from Microsoft in GitHub Actions in that they got inspired and used a lot of the solution from GitHub from Azure DevOps when GitHub Actions was first created. And nowadays, I think there's a lot of shared technology in both solutions, so they are very similar. So usually it boils down to where you have your source code, what will be most convenient for you.
Yeah, and if you're working with Azure DevOps and you have code there at the moment and you want to switch over to GitHub, you can actually just move your code from the beginning, and then you can still use your Azure pipelines. to the code in GitHub. So the integration is really good. So you can gradually move over if you want to.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to talk a brief thing. We are doing a session next week that is not Reactor. It's GitHub Copilot. It's a free session in a meetup that we are running, and I will post a link in the chat here as well if you would like to join. So that's the AI-based code companion that GitHub launched some time ago.
That's really useful. Using it every day.
So I think that will be all. I don't see any more final questions, and I'm really happy all of you joined. And thank you, Madis, for a good presentation. Matthias, good moderation, and hopefully we'll see you all next week.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yep.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.